Hello and welcome to another Chess Heroes video featuring Wilhelm Steinitz, the first official world chess champion. So in this game, Steinitz has the black pieces and he's playing against Johannes Zukertort, also one of the greatest players of this time. So this game takes place in 1886. Which is the year that Steinitz became world champion. Steinitz lived from 1836, where he was born in Prague, which was part of the Austrian Empire at that time. And then he later moved to the United States and lived in New York City. So he was considered an Austrian American player. Unfortunately, he died at the age of 64 when he was he kind of had trouble later in his career. His career and health went downhill. He was known for drinking. He didn't take care of his finances. So he died at the age of 64 from a heart attack in the year 1900. And he was kind of broke and penniless when he died because he just was not good at handling his finances. But he was considered one of the greatest players of the 1800s, and he probably could have been considered the world champion before 1886, which is when he became the official world champion, and he held that title until 1894, when he lost it to Emanuel Lasker, and then they had a rematch in 1896 through 97, but Wilhelm Steinitz lost. And now he's also known for being a chess theoretician and writing a lot about strategy and coming up with a lot of concepts. In the 1800s and earlier, chess was a highly tactical attacking game most of the time. They wouldn't always play the best moves because they just wanted to attack. But Steinitz came up with a good positional theory that later players, at first they thought it was cowardly to play positional chess, but later they realized how strong it was, that it was better to play offense and defense instead of just offense the whole time. So let's take a look at this game. It looks like Wilhelm Steinitz played with 86.8% accuracy versus 78.9% by his opponent, and he had one brilliant move and two great moves versus one great move by his opponent. And then he had two inaccuracies, his opponent had one, but his opponent had four mistakes, and Steinitz only had one, and they both had one missed opportunity. All right, let's turn on the analysis and take a look at this and see how this game played out. So Johannes Zukertort plays d4 here, and then we have d5, c4, the Queen's Gambit. Now, will it be accepted or declined? We have the Queen's Gambit declined, so the game continues with the common move knight to c3, just adding more pressure on this d5 pawn. And so knight to f6 helps fortify the d5 pawn. And Zukertort pins the knight to the queen. So this kind of prevents this knight from defending this pawn. Otherwise, the queen could be captured if it moves. All right, the pin is broken. And now we have knight to f3, castling, and an interesting move, but an inaccuracy here. Instead of capturing in the center, which is usually what is played, we have a pawn pushing forward, and sometimes the pawn doesn't even capture. It just sits there, and then this pawn is moved, and if it is captured by black, then the bishop can recapture. But pushing forward here is not the best move. The computer just recommends rook to c1, just grabbing this file where the c pawn has been pushed forward in case there's an exchange. Then the rook will be on a half open file. So immediately Steinitz attacks this pawn. We have b4, a mistake here. So instead, that pawn should immediately just have gone ahead and captured, because let's say Steinitz captures, the pawn recaptures. Well, at some point, this pawn could push forward and exchange, and then you'll be left with this weak weak pawn that has pressed forward, and it's harder to defend it when it's moved way up the board there and it's all by itself. But in the game, we have capture, recapture. Now, Zukertort, computer says that he should have definitely captured towards the center. Now, this does give him a pawn majority on the queen side, but Steinitz has a pawn majority in the center and on the king side. So the game continues with a4, trying to break these pawns up, exchange here and leave two isolated pawns. So Zukertort defends the pawn. And then we have a d4 pawn push here, gaining more space in the center for black. And perhaps he can jump forward here, having a discovered attack on the bishop, and the knight would be under attack as well. So Zukertort plays the best move, capturing, and then apparently this is the best move, breaking the pawns up, capturing towards the center, which allows a half-open file to target the king side when white castles there. So let's see how the game continues. The knight jumps to the edge of the board. And you don't usually want to do that, so we'll have to see where this knight thinks it's going. Maybe it wants to reposition here and then blockade this pawn. So we have e5, a mistake by Steinitz, but he's pushing forward, fortifying this central pawn. And then Zukertort plays a great move here. Apparently this is the best move to push forward. Now this pawn is protected by the knight, so that kind of explains why the knight went there. And perhaps the b pawn in the future could push and give a passed pawn, and a pawn majority here on the queen side. So Steinitz decides to develop his other bishop, because he does have the bishop pair, and that can be an advantage, and that's probably why black has a slight edge according to the computer. So g6 is played, perhaps preparing to fianchetto this bishop and castle, and c6, the best move in the position. So a confrontation here between these pawns. What should white play? If he captures the pawn, it just helps black to develop this knight and blockade this pawn. He could push forward here. So let's see. Instead, there's a capture, and that was a mistake. It would have been better to push forward and have a passed pawn on the queen side. And now this just helps Steinitz develop his knight. So we have the bishop to g2 here. White is ready to castle. And Steinitz grabs the open file with his rook, which is usually a good plan, but the computer says it's an inaccuracy, that it would have been a little bit better to start pushing the doubled pawn here to f5. So the queen moves over to c1, where it can jump up here, perhaps to the king side, and maybe try and get some kind of activity going. But this is an inaccuracy. Knight to h4 first would have been better. So the game continues with the d pawn pushing forward, attacking this e pawn. What is this pawn doing? So instead of capturing and allowing the queen to come up the board, we have this move, e3. So a pawn push. Now a passed pawn by Steinitz that is backed up, and the knight is under attack. So knight drops back here to prevent a fork of the king and queen, although that's not possible at the moment. But that could be a potential problem in the future. So the knight blockades. Knight in front of a passed pawn is usually a good idea to help stop that pawn's momentum. And f5, the best move in the game. Just pushing the doubled pawn, activating this bishop, which, at the moment, Steinitz has the dark squared bishop and his opponent does not. So that could be of value. Maybe the bishop goes to f6 and grabs this long diagonal, targets the rook. So castling, rook is centralized, and now pawns confronting one another, trying to exchange off here perhaps. And a brilliant move by Steinitz. So let's see why this move is so brilliant. If we go back here, that is definitely the best move. There are a couple other good moves like bishop to g5 or even knight to e5. But this move places the knight where it can be captured. And there's another problem. If this knight jumps here to e2, we have a fork of king and queen. So, why would you not want to capture here? Well, if you capture, the queen could recapture, forking the king, grabbing a pawn and forking the king and the knight over here, and the material would be recovered, and black would even go ahead in material. So we have a capture with the fork. So the king moves, and instead of capturing the knight, we have an attack on this knight, and this pair of passed pawns is trying to move forward. So the knight retreats back here, getting out of the line of fire of the queen. And now, instead of capturing the knight, the pressure is just added here. Steinitz just develops his bishop, the best move in the position, and he's pretty much winning here according to the computer. It's looking pretty rough. Both knights are under attack. So what does Zuckertort do? He drops back to defend the knights. But now we have d2, pressing forward, attacking the queen. So, how will the game continue? We have queen to c2. The rook, queen, and knight are keeping an eye on this promotion square. But now the bishop jumps in here, attacking the queen and covering, attacking the promotion square. So the game is getting crazy. So if we go back, the queen jumps up here, the best move, grabbing the pawn, and the game continues with a promotion to queen here. So knight captures. Apparently this is the best move, but now there's the possibility of just grabbing this rook here. But instead of that, we have bishop capturing in the center here, and then the knight, it's looking terrible now. So, it looks like he's pretty much lost. The pawn pushes forward, protecting the bishop. The rook captures, but now the knight is picked off, and here Johannes Zuckertort resigns. Steinitz just piled on the pressure here, all focusing around promoting one of these passed pawns. And now we have a fork at the end of the game. So, as far as material, Zuckertort is ahead by one, but one of these rooks, will fall here. So, how might the game play out? Computer recommends h3 or h4 as the best move, and then one of the rooks will just be captured. So there you have it. Interesting game by Wilhelm Steinitz. I would recommend that you go over the games of Steinitz and hang around in the future in the future I will do another video on the next the second world chess champion, which was Emanuel Lasker. So that is who Steinitz lost to in 1894. So Wilhelm Steinitz held the World Chess Championship title from 1886 to 1894. So for 8 years, he was the first world chess champion before he was defeated by Emanuel Lasker. So I'll go over an Emanuel Lasker game in the next Chess Heroes video. So please feel free to leave any comments that you would like to. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. And have a super chess day.